this is very brief, and what I'm going to do is basically show you some pictures of what I do for a living in Pittsburgh. But there's a theme. The theme is that I built a training center a number of years ago for people who were disadvantaged. I grew up in the neighborhood, as the speaker mentioned, in Manchester section of Pittsburgh. My life, I need to be able to see these slides. Could you maybe turn that around? Is that possible? There we go. Perfect. As the result of a public school teacher, I actually found a way to get a decent education in the Pittsburgh public school system. And Mr. Ross, who was my art teacher, said, "I think you're too smart to die. I don't want it on my conscience, you're going to college." So Mr. Ross hounded me till I filled out an application at the University of Pittsburgh and applied to Pitt. And then they sent me a test called the SAT test, which I'd never seen before. So I kind of marked the thing up. It was multiple choice, so I flunked the test. But they let me in on probation. And I almost flunked out the first term. The second term I was on the dean's list. And I ended up graduating from Pitt, and then they gave me a PhD. And then I spoke at the commencement. And I said, don't give up on the poor kids. It might end up being a commencement speaker. And to the extent that I have anything to say, it's that people are born into the world as assets, not liabilities. It's the way that you treat people that drives behavior. And just because you were born poor doesn't mean you have to stay that way. And so what I discovered in building this center is that the only thing wrong with poor people is they don't have any money, which happens to be a curable condition. It's all in the way that you treat people that drives behavior. So what I did was I built that. This is my idea of a school for poor people. It happens to be also the scale model for the Pittsburgh airport. And it was done by you ever heard of an architect named Frank Lloyd Wright? All right, well, I did too. And I hired one of his students to build this training center in my neighborhood. And it's worked out pretty good. And the philosophy was, poor people always get treated to the worst conditions, not the best conditions. So I decided to flip the thing on its head and say, why don't we treat the guys who have been denied a chance, a real opportunity? And so I built this training center. And it's worked out pretty good. That's the entrance to the building. I'm a big believer in environment. Beautiful environments create beautiful students. Prisons create prisoners. And so this is our concept of what a school's supposed to look like every day. And as you will see, we also have, oh, by the way, that's at Christmas time. I believe that if you believe in life, you ought to look like it. And a lot of the students I work with have lost their hope. And so I'm in the business of trying to restore hope to people who've kind of lost their way. They lost their job, they're on public assistance, et cetera, et cetera. They're depressed. So I said, let's figure out a cure for the depression. So I'm showing you my version of the cure for depression. That's our boardroom. I hired a Japanese cat maker to do 60 pieces of furniture for the school. By the way, this is our first entrepreneurial adventure, because I know some of you are interested in entrepreneurship. Well, we spun this guy off into his own business, and he's got a year waiting list doing furniture for rich people in Pennsylvania. But I got 60 pieces out of it for my school, and it's worked out pretty good. I hope you eat Heinz ketchup up here. If you don't, you ought to start. I'm an unapologetic proponent of Heinz ketchup. And the reason is, once upon a time, there was a guy named John Heinz, who was the heir to the Heinz ketchup fortune, who happened to be our United States Senator. And in the old days, we were a building trades program, and Senator Heinz came to visit me. He said, we'd like to set up a culinary program so we could hire some black people for the Heinz Ketchup Company. Well, we were in this, not doing that very well, and he said, could I persuade you to go into the food business? I said, we're a building trades program. He said, yeah, okay. And then he sat real quietly. He said, well, what would your answer be if I said I'd give you $1 million? I said, Senator, it appears that we're going into the food training business. And John did give me $1 million for real. And lo and behold, they had a research for the Heinz Ketchup Company. And we created a gourmet kitchen, this one, and we've never looked back. By the way, we have 95% placement of everybody that graduates from our program for the last 20 years. Also, we built an amphitheater for the students. That's our pastry department. A couple of our students. That's lunch at our school every day. We decided that if people are hungry, you ought to give them something to eat. But since we don't do fast food, we do gourmet food, every student every day has a gourmet lunch. So if people tell you that you can't serve gourmet food to poor people, send them to Pittsburgh. I've been doing it for 25 years. By the way, these are all the people that supposedly have no imagination. This is what they're doing in 6 months with no background in food preparation. We also have a 95% placement rate with these students in industry. Every class, Marriott hired the whole last class. The recruiter came in, hired everybody. One of our students, that's Chef Keith, he teaches production cooking. That's our dining room. Reminds you of your high school cafeteria, right? That's where we feed the students. And we got the black students and the white students eating together voluntarily without me giving the civil rights speech. What we discovered is if you build world-class facilities, people see themselves as the same. If you build prisons, they treat each other like prisoners. And as my daughter will tell you, we're in a tough inner city neighborhood, and in 50 years, we've never had one police call, or a drug incident, or an alcohol incident. That's not luck. That's strategy. Oh, we also train pharmaceutical techs for the medical industry. And we train for, you heard of Bayer aspirin? Well, we train technicians for the chemical company, big time. And Covestro, and Nova Chemical, and Calgon Carbon, et cetera. So what I've been able to prove is that you can take people with marginal academic skills, and in less than 12 months, I can have them working at Fortune 100 chemical companies. And we have a 100% placement with the chemical companies. So we can take people with marginal academic skills, and in 12 months, I can have them making 6 figures at world-class chemical companies in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Some of our people. Oh, by the way, I have 500 students now working for UPMC, and we also train for the Allegheny Health Network. This guy was working for the, was down to his last unemployment check. He's now working for the Water Treatment Authority. He went from unemployment to $60,000 a year in 12 months. Look at the equations on the board. These are people who supposedly can't learn technology. Well, they can learn technology fine. You just have to want to teach it to them bad enough. So we worked that problem out pretty good. These are our medical coders, some of our students, and I also have people in the program who struggle to read. And so we're able to get them literate in about 12 months. Because if they're not reading, they're also not working. So we figured out how to get people to read in about 12 months at a high school equivalency. This is the arts program. I started in 1968. Remember, I'm the black guy from the 60s making pottery. How many are you even alive in the 60s? Raise your hands. Okay. One time, nobody raised their hand. So I got to check out who I'm talking to. The jokes don't work. Well, I was around during what they called the disturbances. Back then, we called them riots. And guys were getting shot in the neighborhood. So I set up this program, started working with kids from the school system. And I started hearing back from the public school system that whatever I was doing with these kids, they were starting to show up at school more regularly. And after a couple years, I figured it out. The kids were fine. What they needed was encouragement. And so we've increased the graduation rate by 20% in 24 months using the arts as the intervention strategy, real time. So we do clay. These are all students. By the way, that guy's at Penn State. Even though I'm a Pitt guy, I won't hold it against him. This is kids' work, by the way. These are all the kids who have been given up on. They have no talent. Well, we discovered that they have plenty of talent. But you must build an environment that lets these children know that they have value. If you can do that, you can solve the problem. And so we got that problem figured out. This kid won a 4-year scholarship on the strength of that piece. Mosaic project that the kids did for the school. Look at that young man's eyes. That's a kid that everybody gave up on for dead. Well, look at his eyes. He's learning digital imaging, by the way, in our $1 million digital imaging center. Look at this guy. And look at this fellow. And if anybody's from Pittsburgh and doesn't know where that is, you flunked the course. And this picture was taken by a guy that now works for the Walt Disney Studios. And this is our gallery for the students. This is how we exhibit the work of poor people. I even got the parents coming to the art openings. I couldn't buy a parent 15 years ago, none of the parents would show up. And the kids got very despondent because their parents wouldn't come to support their art opening. So I got kind of discouraged about seeing all these kids crying because their parents wouldn't come and support them at the art opening. So I hired a guy that got off into Jesus, you know, saving souls for the Lord with a Bible and all that kind of stuff. I said, I want you to come work for me, tone down the Jesus stuff, but keep the enthusiasm. I can't get the parents to come. He said, I'll get them to come. So he took the keys to the van and went to Miss Jones's house, said, Miss Jones, I knew you wanted to come to your kid's art opening, but you probably didn't have a ride. So I came to give you a ride. Well, last show we did, 300 parents showed up, and we gave away $100,000 in scholarships, and the black folks and the white folks and the Hispanic folks all showed up en masse. So we solved that problem. On the left is the instructor, on the right is the student. We're developing a new concept in education. It's called We Love Our Students. Very revolutionary. The guy on the left was a student of mine. The lady on the right is his student. And don't laugh at me. Those are old computers. And the reason they're up there is once upon a time, I actually had slides. Do you remember what they looked like? You know, with a box and a slide projector and all that kind of stuff? Well, I got invited out to a place called the Silicon Valley. And I showed up with this slide projector. And these people looked at me like I was from Pluto, man. But that's cool. I plugged in the slide projector, got up and told my story. And the guy come out of the audience, he said, man, that was a heck of a story. I said, cool, man, what do you do for a living? He said, oh, I built a company called eBay. I said, great, you got a card? Remember, I ain't the techie guy. So I put the kid's card in my pocket, and I went back to Pittsburgh and asked one of the little techie kids, I said, have you ever heard of something called eBay? He said, yeah, Mr. Strickland, that's the Electronic Commerce Network. I said, holy smokes, I met the guy that built the company, man. So I called him up. I said, Mr. Skull, I've come to have a much deeper appreciation of who you are, man. And he laughed. He said, I thought you'd figure it out sooner or later. So he gave me $1 million. His name was Jeff Skull, and he built eBay. And we've been friends for 25 years. And I said, why are you doing this? He said, I think you can scale this globally. And I'm making my bet on you. And Jeff and I have become very good friends. He was a good man. He still is a good man. And it's turning out to be a very interesting story. So we built that. You've heard of a company called HP? Well, they got interested in me because of Jeff Skull giving me that $1 million. And what I was able to convince them to do was to build me a $500,000 digital imaging center, which is that. And it's for the kids. Oh, I also built a music hall while I was at it. And a guy named Dizzy Gillespie showed up. He's a pretty good trumpet player. And I said to Dizzy Gillespie, why would you show up at a black school that doesn't even have a reputation in music? He said, Billy Taylor told me a black guy built it and I didn't believe one to see for myself. And you're too young to appreciate what you've done here, man, but I'm not. And so he allowed us to record the concert. And he gave us the rights to the music. Have y'all ever heard of something called the Grammy Awards? Well, I've won 5 Grammys. We have the highest win rate of any small record company in the world in a black neighborhood in the middle of the inner city of Pittsburgh. So we have a record company now. And MCG Jazz is in the record business. So that's my second entrepreneurial story. And it threatens to be making money pretty soon. We got invited by the Smithsonian Museum to do a global tour of the Smithsonian Jazz Orchestra, and they paid us $2 million to do it. And so our guys are in London right now, hosted by our little arts program, Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, that set up the Grammy Award-winning jazz concert. Look at these children's faces. These are kids who are excited to be living in my center. In fact, that's the way kids are supposed to be looking when they go to school. Because if they're not looking like that, they ain't learning anything. They're the kids. Oh, there's Dizzy Gillespie, just in case you thought I was lying. He was there. And that's a fellow named Pat Metheny, pretty good guitar player. And there are the Grammys that we won, back to back with Nancy Wilson, the Basie Band, etc. So we're on our way to becoming what we think one of the world's greatest jazz recording companies, maybe of all time. We'll see. That's our 5-point surround sound recording studio. And this is the place on opening night. If you'd have dropped a bomb in that room, you'd have wiped out all the rich people in Pennsylvania because they were all sitting there, including my mother and father who were in the 3rd row, our grandparents. And they're gone now, but they lived long enough to see their kid open up the center black tie. The next night I had the neighborhood come in, and there was no black tie required. Why? Because I wanted to establish the principle that you don't have to have a tuxedo to be treated with dignity. And I knew that would resonate with people, so we now sell all of our jazz concerts in subscription 3 weeks after the season's announced in the middle of the inner city of Pittsburgh. Worked out pretty good. Oh, we also built a greenhouse. We built a greenhouse because I like flowers. And I decided to grow orchids in my neighborhood. This is the third business, by the way. I grow Phalaenopsis orchids, and I have a horticultural training program. And everybody that we're training in horticulture is going to work in the industry. And it's working out pretty good as a business. In fact, we're selling every orchid that we grow in Pittsburgh. My staff literally laughed at me when I said I was going to grow orchids in the middle of this black neighborhood. Well, they ain't laughing now, because we beat out Miracle Grow at the Home and Garden Show, because we've gotten so good at growing these orchids. Those orchids. And we're now growing those. And we're also growing hydrangeas. Does Giant Eagle have a facility up this way? Well, they bought all of our hydrangeas. 4,000. They backed 2 trucks up and loaded up the whole crop. And then we got into growing poinsettias. And we did a deal with the zoo. They did a project with the polar bears as a charity. So they bought all the poinsettias at Christmas time. So we're now in the poinsettia business. So we started with orchids, we are selling hydrangeas, and now we're in the poinsettia business. So everything that we're growing is making a lot of money, is the point of the story. That's 3 businesses in the last 10 minutes. That's the Home and Garden Show where we beat out Miracle Grow. Oh, we're also starting to grow tomatoes. Hydroponic heirloom tomatoes, anybody? And the Giant Eagle grocery store chain has gotten very interested in us, because I said, I buy these things at the grocery store. And one of them said Holland, and I happen to know the owner of Giant Eagle grocery store chains. And I said, where you buy these things at? Holland, Michigan. He said, no, Holland, like, you know, Northern Europe. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, man. Holland's gray, Pittsburgh's gray, Holland's cold, Pittsburgh's cold. Why can't you grow tomatoes in Pittsburgh? So on the basis of that scientific analysis, I built a greenhouse. And we're just about to go ballistic, growing hydroponic, stem-ripened tomatoes and strawberries. Stay tuned. This is going to be a very big deal. And I said, rather than import them from Holland, Michigan, why don't you import them from Pittsburgh? And they said, you know, that's a brilliant idea. And I think it's game on. Oh, by the way, remember that $1 million Mr. Skoll gave me? Well, he predicted I was going to start building centers. Well, I have. These centers are now all open. In fact, I got 12 centers that are open, including, see Sharon, Pennsylvania up there? Okay. The lieutenant governor is going to go visit the place tomorrow. And we got one open in Cleveland, New Haven, Chicago, Boston, Brockway, etc. And Brockway is, I think, from here is north, up near Du Bois. And we just signed up Erie, and we just signed up Westmoreland County, and we just signed up Titusville and Lancaster. So we're going to build 4 more. And so the plan is to start building these things across Pennsylvania yesterday for people who have been given up on. I specialize in all the people that don't feel they have a life anymore. Well, they have a life. They just have to be given facilities and encouragement to take charge of their life. And we can solve this problem. And I'm very pleased to tell you that we have an administration that thinks that this is true. And it's, so far, been a bipartisan conversation in Pennsylvania. So I'm very proud of Pennsylvania for stepping up to help people who have been dislocated or chronically unemployed. This is the center we opened in San Francisco. Oh, that's Mr. Skoll, the billionaire guy that built eBay, and Billy Wong, and the kids are doing digital imaging. Every center is beautiful, or we will not build it. Look at these children. They have smiles on their face. That's Cincinnati. 100% graduation in the kids in Cincinnati. There's the space, there's the gallery. This is Grand Rapids, 95% graduation rate with the kids. Western Michigan Center for Arts and Technology. By the way, this is the space for the kids. And this is where they eat lunch. And we have, these are some of the kids in the photography program. And one of the things I've been able to discover is the secret to getting them to pull their pants up. What we've discovered is their girlfriends tell them to pull their pants up. If I tell them, they won't, but the girlfriends will. So I'm trying to patent this process and turn it into a business. These are all medical technicians going to work for the healthcare system. By the way, we have 95% placement with these guys. And this is the one we built in Cleveland. And these are some of the kids. We saw kids get off the bus for the first time and they walked away because they thought they got off at the wrong center. They couldn't comprehend that something that beautiful was for them. That guy records with a woman named Alicia Keys. And this was the first phlebotomy class, and that's the facility we built. And this is the one we built in New Haven. By the way, this is a business. These guys just got a $100 million investment from a wealthy guy who loved the concept of the center so much, he gave him $100 million to build a whole neighborhood. So these guys are at the top of the heap now. And this is New England, Center for Arts and Technology. And guess what? We're training all the culinary people for the gaming industry in Boston. They hired the whole last class. That's the facility we built for them. And this is one of the students. 75% of those people had criminal records. They're all working for Legal Seafoods with living wages today. And this is the one that's open in Buffalo. That's the center we built. And there are the photographs of Dr. King taken during the last 2 years of his life. And some of the students doing a mural. Oh, and this is the one that's open in Brockway, Pennsylvania. That's the center in Brockway. It's the old Brockway glass plant. Clay, jewelry. This is Chicago. This is the center. They're doing digital imaging. This is the Hope Center in Sharon. This is the building. This is what it looks like now. Oh, and I also built one in Israel for the Jews and the Arabs. I got them going to school together. And they're getting along fine. And somebody said, well, where's the security system? I said, it's called the student body. They haven't had an incident since they've been open. Right there. Oh, that guy's name is Sharon Perez. He encouraged me to build this center. And he said, don't go left or go right. Just keep going straight, and you can pull it off. This is the first class, half Jews, half Arabs. You see anybody frowning in that picture? And this is at the opening. And these are some of the students. And Erie, Tacoma, and Vancouver are the next group. And these places are now being talked to about building centers, including Puerto Rico. And these centers are now being contemplated, and London's being contemplated. And I have a book out called Make the Impossible Possible. You ought to buy the book. It's big type and it's real short. And that's my story. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Now, if you have time, I can do a couple questions if you have time. If we have time, I would be more than happy. I would be more than happy to answer a question or two if you have it. Anybody? Yes. They picked me because I know I got a big mouth and I'm always talking. And inevitably there's somebody in the audience that says, could you build one of these in my town? And I don't know who it is, but I follow up every lead. And that's how we build the centers. Jeff Skull, you know, Mr. eBay, the kid had holes in his blue jeans and tennis shoes on, man, when I met the guy. And I could have blown him off, and I said, nah, there's something about this guy. I'm going to check him out. I'm glad I did. So you never know in what form your next millionaire is going to show up. So my advice is treat everybody like they're a millionaire, and it may help you get your center built. Every center has grown out of a slideshow. Every center, including Israel. I showed these slides to the Palestinians, man, and the Palestinians. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention, I was with the Dalai Lama 3 weeks ago in India. Nice man. And he liked the slideshow. And I think we're going to build a center in India or Tibet. And sure. Actually, we're building one in Westmoreland County, so that's more or less in that quadrant. But sure, we'll build one in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I want to build them all over Pennsylvania, period. Like yesterday. Come on, guys. That's why I came up here. Not to entertain you, man. I came up here to recruit you. We have work to do. Let's go. You're good people, and the demographics of the people working in all these centers are the demographics right here. They're the same people. We're all built the same, man. That's the whole point of the story. Poverty is poverty. I don't care what community it's in, it all feels about the same. But there are answers to this stuff. That's what I'm telling you. Now look, I'm a guy from the north side of Pittsburgh, and if I can get the Jews and the Arabs going to school together, if I were you, I'd follow me, man. So don't tell me what you can't do. Let's talk about what you can do. And don't tell me about the money, because my daughter will tell you what it costs to lock people up in the penitentiary in Pennsylvania, okay? It's a whole lot less than what I'm spending to get them trained for new lives. This has got to stop. We have the funding. If you add up all the money for drug rehab and incarceration, you could build 100 centers like this. Let's start talking about how to bring common sense back into this conversation, which happens to be in very short supply in our country right now. Another question. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for sharing. But how do students get enrolled in your program?
Show up at the front door.
That's it. Thank you.
Very simple. There is no entrance exam. We give you an aptitude test to find out where you are academically, because I'm not in the miracle business. I can't make you a chem tech if you're reading at the third grade level. Don't get confused. You got it. But we can solve that because we have an academic program that's accelerated, so we can get you to high school equivalency pretty quick. But it's hard work. So don't get seduced by these pictures. This is hard work, man. I make it look easy because that's my job. But it's hard. And when you're poor, the worst part about being poor is what it does to your spirit. When you lose your spirit because you're despondent, you don't think straight. So what I told the people in Titusville is, let's get hope back in the conversation and let's get fear out of the conversation. The only thing wrong with you people in Titusville is you lost your hope. So I'm here to give you your hope back. And so far they're listening. In fact, the governor just put money in the budget to rebuild the Titusville campus. And we're very excited about that development. Anybody else? Yes.
What is your succession plan? Because clearly you're 1 in a million.
Well, fortunately, I'm not. I'm 2 in a million because I picked my replacement. Technically, as my daughter will tell you, I'm retired. Technically. But what I want to do for a living is what I'm doing today. I want to build centers. And I'll personalize this. I had a double lung transplant, by the way, 3 years ago. And the good news is it worked. The better news is I rediscovered God during the process of my recovery. And I'm not pushing church on anybody, but the surgeon said, look, I'm a scientist, and I'm not supposed to tell you this, but God kept you here, not me. I had the tools, but the inspiration came from a higher power. I think that you're here and have been left here to build centers for people who are struggling in the world. And as her grandmother will tell you, were she alive, she implanted a gene at the base of my brainstem that prevents me from blocking out images of human suffering. So when I'm seeing the kids on CNN dying in their mother's arms from hunger, I don't sleep well. And I'm very proud to tell you that my daughter has followed my path in that regard. This has got to stop, man. We can't live like this. We can't let people dying of hunger in their parents' arms because we can't feed them. So I want to do something about that with your help. And if you'd like to pursue the conversation, I'll be around. And I would love to see you come visit the center in Pittsburgh yesterday. And maybe we can get something done. Who knows? Thanks. Yes, sir.